Hello, it's Greg Otten here with MaritimeGardening.com, and today I'm going to talk about what I consider a unique approach to permaculture gardening, and that is growing an herb garden in sand, and also a different take on planting things in pots. There's all kinds of people these days talking about having things in pots, and yeah, if you have a deck, if you live in an apartment and all you have is a balcony, then yeah, grow stuff in pots. But if you own land, and I own land, I own 2 acres here, why on earth would you put anything in a pot when you could put it in the ground where the water is? Right? If you have it in a pot, you have to do the watering. It's going to get some rain, but the rain a pot collects is nothing compared to the rain the soil collects. Right? Because all the adjacent soil is collecting rain too, and your roots will reach out and grab that. So I'm going to give you an idea about how to do something like that. So here I have an area in my driveway where I always had weeds here. Okay, I stack my wood here, I heat my house with wood, keep the wood over here. This is a south-facing wall. Okay, south is that way. Right? And I always had a ridiculous amount of weeds along this wall. And of course it's close to my kitchen. And if you read permaculture literature, they're always talking about just observing and thinking and contemplating and looking at what's going on and figuring out ways to work with your problems. And so I've got a weed problem here in my driveway. It's not a real big deal, but I don't want weeds in my gravel, right? I want gravel in my gravel. And this area here always had weeds. And one day it just dawned on me, why don't you plant something there? I mean, everything's growing here. I can see right now. Yeah, I'll pick this out. I don't know if you can see this. This is kale. Okay, I don't know how this seed got here, but a kale seed got dropped in my driveway and it germinated. There's kale growing in my driveway. I just killed it, of course, but this is obviously a good place. Even though the existing soil was literally the clay, the kind of soil landscapers use when they build a property, so it's not for growing things on, it's for building things on, so it's just hard, rocky clay type stuff. That sort of stuff with gravel on top of it, and still things grow here because it's just so favorable, right? It's relatively protected. I've got big piles of wood here. I got beautiful sun coming in from the south. It gets rain from the sky, and it's close to the house, so it's warm. So I thought, there should be a garden here. Why am I weeding this? Right? Why don't I turn this into a place that's working for me? Why don't I put weeds in that I like? And because I use herbs in my garden, or herbs in my kitchen for all my cooking, we use a ridiculous amount of herbs every year, I thought, why not turn this into an herb garden? And I was watching the Back to Eden garden film with Paul Gauci, and he talks about all these different mulches, and he mentions rocks as a mulch. Now, rocks aren't a mulch that are going to feed your soil, but they definitely will preserve, hold the moisture in your soil. And I just gotten a whole bunch of sand to build a sandbox for my kids, and I had a ridiculous amount of leftover sand, and I thought, well, sand is rocks, they're just tiny rocks. So I built a little frame here just so it looked nice, because you know, people are going to see this, and I covered all the ground with paper, heavy cardboard craft paper to kill the existing weeds, and then I put the sand down, and then I poke holes in the cardboard and dug holes in the sand, moved the sand aside and dug holes, and put some really good soil in the hole, and then put herbs in. And most of these are perennial herbs, but I have a couple different kinds of herbs that are annuals that just don't survive the winter here that I like to grow as well. And this is year 2 or year 3 of this, and it's doing really well. This oregano, for instance, is doing really well. This is parsley. I just put this in because parsley is a biennial. This sage is on its 2nd or 3rd year, and it's coming back fine. The savory is doing very well, and it's handy to my kitchen, so whenever I need something I can just run out and grab it. And it's been completely weed free, because when a weed seed lands on the sand, it's a desert. Seeds don't germinate in a desert, right? So it just bakes in the sun and doesn't really get there. And if you dig down, it's wet, right? I never water this garden. The only watering this garden gets is once a year. Once a year in the spring, around this time of year, I water each plant with compost tea. because this sand isn't providing any nutrients to the soil. I mean, herbs don't need a lot. They're basically just weeds that happen to taste the way we like weeds to taste. They add nice flavors to our food. But the sand doesn't really add anything. It's not organic, it's inorganic. It adds minerals, but it doesn't add any sort of, nitrogen or anything like that. So I pour a good amount of compost tea on every plant once a year, and that's the only work I do in this garden. I might get 1 or 2 weeds in the whole thing once a year. I never water it. I just come out here and take the herbs when I want them. At the end of the year, I cut everything off and dry it out, and it provides all my herbs for the entire year. I don't have to buy herbs, and we use a ridiculous amount in our cooking. So today I'm going to put a basil plant in here just to show you how I deal with this, and hopefully this is a useful idea for you. If you've got a driveway with weeds, why not put it to work? Okay, so stay with me. Let's have a look. Alright, so here I got one spot in my garden where nothing's growing, and I planted some basil here about a month ago, and it was just too early for basil for this part of the world, for this climate. The soil wasn't warm enough. It suffered greatly. It's still alive, but I don't know. I'm not sure if it's going to come back. I figured it was worth shucking out $2.99 and buying another basil plant. So get rid of that guy. And so here's how I deal with this. And this is an example of the flower pot idea. So this whole area is just underneath this sand is gravel and clay, right? So the soil isn't that good, but the conditions are great because it's nice and warm. So I just move the sand aside, because I don't want sand in my soil, right? I want soil in my soil. This is what I'm calling a flower pot. And then I just dig a hole in the ground, right? Gather that. That's a flower pot, right? If it isn't a flower pot, I don't know what it is. Right? A flower pot's just a hole above the ground. This is a flower pot below the ground. You don't have to have a big, beautiful, tilled up, rototilled, amazing garden. If you dig a hole in the ground and put good soil in the hole, like that, right? This is stuff from my compost pile. You basically got a flower pot. So now I'm going to put my basil transplant in here. And the soil. And surround it with good stuff. Pat it down a little bit and move the sand back. That'll keep it moist. You can see anywhere in my garden here where it's dry. If I dig down, you don't have to go very far for it to be wet, right? That's just what these, even though it's sand, it's rocks, right? That's what rocks do. They keep moisture in soil. One of the things they do. We'll smooth that back out. That's done. We'll see how this guy does. The last one did not do well, but everything else in here does fine. And I think just the soil was too cold when I put the original basil in, and the roots got too cold. And basil is a heat-loving plant, and I just rushed it a little bit. A little too impatient. All right, so that's done. That's all that takes, right? And I don't have to water this. That's the advantage of this over a flower pot. I don't have to water this at all. Alright, so just a quick little video on an interesting application of permaculture in a garden. It's not exactly permaculture in the sense that it's not as sustainable, because I don't have, you're supposed to have a soil situation that's perpetually breaking down and perpetually feeding the soil. I don't have that here because I've got the sand. But for herbs, it works just fine. All I got to do is put compost tea on it once a year. I think even if I didn't do that, most of the herbs would do just fine anyway, because they're tough, right? So I hope you find that interesting. If you enjoy this content, subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, check out our podcast, maritimegardening.com, to hear more ideas like this, and check out my column in the Local Express. Until next time, get out there, get at it, have fun in your garden. Thanks, bye.